people, so today I will be explaining evolution and like how it works for different creatures and stuff. So to first explain how it really works, there needs to be an animal first. So let's make a little blue guy here with a green body. So this is the Timothy. And the Timothy, the background is all white because he lives in Antarctica. But then he is really, really he doesn't have any fur. So he can't be kept warm. So you give him some fur, but you can't just boom, there's fur on it. No. So this Timothy, boom. The Timothy dies, but then there's a newer Timothy, but that Timothy is still the same species of Timothy. So this Timothy's different because he has fur. So then this Timothy will survive, but the other one didn't. So then this one, in its DNA is the gene for fur in the Timothys to keep them warm because they live in Antarctica. So they would keep getting more furry to keep them warm. So then this is generation 1, 2, but then they're more. But then you get to generation 3. All of the Timothys with fur have survived, so their genes have been passed down. So then they all survived. So pretty soon all of the Timothys have fur. But then so we go back to the start with our first non-hairy Timothy. Okay, now he has a skin now, but that's okay. So we go back to our first Timothy with no hair. He died off. But the Timothy with the fur survived. So this one, his DNA wasn't passed on to generation number 2. But this one survived because of the fur. And then that's basically how creatures evolve and adapt to their different landscapes. But if we applied this to a different scenario, that it's 10 years, there's the sun. I don't know why it's red, just scary. Let's make it orange. So the sun's there, and the sun is really hot, so it melted Antarctica. So now it's just a bunch of water. Why is the water purple? So, okay, you get the point. Now it's just a bunch of water. But it's not all water because Antarctica is pretty big. So there's these little things, there's little ice things, and on those ice things live Timothys. But this water is still really, really cold. But the thing is, if their fur gets wet, then they won't be able to get warm in the first place. So over time, the icebergs melt. So the icebergs melt, and the Timothys that have the fur die out. But then the Timothys that are super fat survive because they have enough blubber to keep them warm. So then the Timothys that from when they were furry and the icebergs were melting, then the fat ones that would hunt more survived better because it wasn't just instantly like Antarctica starts to melt. It was a gradual decline of the icebergs. So then, the fat Timothys survived better because they were getting fatter, but then the skinny one, the furry ones, were just slowly dying out because as the icebergs melt and the water gets more, they need to go into the water to swim. So then the furry Timothys are gone, and now the fat Timothys, after a couple generations, which we applied to this one, the furry ones, the furries die out, so they're gone. But then all that's left are the fat ones. And the fat ones are the only ones whose genes will get passed on to Timothy generation number 2. But then they're also fat because this one's fat. But you may be thinking, well, if the first Timothy is getting fat because the first Timothy's gotten fat, so the next generation wouldn't be born fat because the first Timothy just ate a bunch. And to that I say, the Timothys gradually evolved to eat more. So then when they were younger, they would eat more, so they would get fatter. So, the icebergs are slowly melting. The furry Timothys are oh, it's so hot because of the sun. But then the fat Timothys just yep, I be eating a lot. But then the furry Timothys die out. Fat Timothys are left. Then the fat ones repopulate just like the ones with no fur didn't survive, but then the furry ones survived. So then you would repeat the cycle because they would need to eat more when they're younger to get fatter, to have more blubber, to be more warm. So I think I'm pretty sure that makes sense. So it's basically like this. So this is the evolution of the Timothys. So no fur, and then it went to furry, to fat, to eating a ton, and then getting super fat when they're younger, so then they can just go dive into the water, swim around with their Timothy friends. But the thing is, the non-furry Timothys, they lived in snow. But then, no. So they didn't live in snow. So let's just entertain the possibility that this is a different universe than the one that we're in. So that Antarctica used to be like this super hot desert, and that's why the Timothys were skinny. And then for a bunch of years, the sun just, for some reason, the orbit of the moon stopped at a total eclipse. So then it got super cold, and then it froze everything for the furry Timothys to come in. So it was frozen and cold and icy and stuff. But then the moon started to move again. So it melted all the icebergs, and it turned it into water for the fat Timothys. But then they stayed the same, but they just were evolved to eat more as it turned totally into water. But then after a while, the Timothys that evolved just to eat a lot more, they would evolve so much because, let's say, because, fun fact, continents can actually, drift. It's called Continental Drift. So, let's say that there's this new continent called Ooga Booga Land. But then Ooga Booga Land comes in here, and it's like, oh, hello, boys and girls. And then it is where Antarctica used to be. And they have green grass and stuff. They bring, giraffes and, elephants, stuff, like hippos. So they all live there. But then suddenly, but there's also they also bring sharks and stuff. So the Timothys now have to compete with the sharks to eat the fish. So then eventually they will evolve to start going on land. Because let's say when they were fat Timothys, so they're fat Timothys right here. but then they grew like fins, so that's how they would swim, like with these wing-looking things. So then the fat timothys started to lose their fins. They went to Ooga Booga Land, and then they started to eat the sharks. But then the sharks start to die out, so then the fish are over, like, they're out of control, they're overpopulated. So then, with all the sharks gone, then the fish start to evolve. And let's just speed up the evolutionary process. Let's say it goes from, here's some super quick evolution. Alright, we got here we go. There's D, and then cat. You need this, and this, and this, and this. You got a little fish with a hard skull thing. Then, well, that's a bad drawing, but you know. Got a fish with a hard skull. You went from hypoichthyes to, I forgot what it's called, but, you know. And then to another thing that I forgot what it's called. It's that lizard thing. And it just crawled out of the ocean, and it, like, basically became humans. So then, again, speed up the evolutionary process. People are born. Here's a person. Yep, that's a person. So then, the people and the fat timothys, they're like, oh hi, we look very similar. But the reason they look similar is because convergent evolution. So, if one creature has something that works, like the fat timothys have 4 legs and 2 arms with hands, then that works. Then the fish gradually evolve over millions of years into people. That's why the people look the same as the fat timothys, just skinnier. But then now, they still eat the fish, because with the fat timothys losing their fins and not eating the sharks anymore, then the shark population bounces back. The fish population is under control. But this guy right here that evolved from that evolved from the fish, is now a person. So then, they have to fight the hippos to like compete for the waters where they're getting the fish. Yep, that's a hippo. But then the people are fast because they're skinny and stuff. So the people can just like, yep, I'm out of here. Goodbye, everybody. So they can just run away from the hippos. But then the fat timothys like, oh my, please help me, I can't move. So then, slowly, the fat Timothys die out, and then, like, the Timothys are desperate. They're like, so then all the skinnier ones, well, no, the fat ones, they're like desperate because they're like dying and stuff. So then the people come along and they're like, oh, hi, yes. Then suddenly the fat Timothys are saved, and then a new baby is born. And look, so that is the little baby. It's still fat, but not as fat. So then this one grows up because its parents, which are the Timothys, but then the fat Timothys die. So sad. The fat Timothys die, but then they cross with the people. So then they're still existent, but then they have become their own new species. So like 20 years later, the fat Timothy, so like the Humanus Timotheus, I'll call it. So the human Timothy is getting slightly less fat, so it can now outrun the hippos. So then it starts to survive more. And then eventually it gets less fat, so then he can outrun them. So then they lose their traits of getting, like super fat and stuff and eating a bunch. So then they are original skinny Timmy, but they have evolved so much. They're an entirely new species now, because technically when they breeded with the humans, they became their own ones. They became their own new species. So then, after a while, the fat Timothys, they're not so fat, like, they got normal arms and stuff, but then you look at their leg muscles, like, they're, like, super strong legs, so they can, like, run super fast to outrun the hippos. So then that angers the hippos. They attack the humans. The humans die out, but then the fat Timothys gradually get more intelligent, because at that point the humans were on the rise in intelligence. So then with them not being able to, with them not having to compete with the humans anymore, they now, like, replace humans. So then they got their spears. They kill the hippos. And then the hippos go extinct. And then the hippos go extinct, and then there's this entire lake filled with fishies that they can all eat. So then the Timothys thrive, and then cut like 50,000 years later, and then suddenly from stupid little helpless creatures with no fur living in Antarctica to furry creatures living in Antarctica to furry creatures dying off on the icebergs of melting Antarctica, and then turning into fat creatures that are like half fish with little flipper things. So then this continent comes in, but then that continent, if it didn't drift into where Antarctica was, then the Timothys wouldn't go there. So that's not behavioral evolution, and it's not wait, what's it called? That's like, so that would be environmental evolution. So the environment around them affects their evolution. So anyways, you cut 50,000 years later, they got city streets, buildings, all because they started from little creatures in Antarctica with no fur. So that's basically the process of evolution. And obviously it's been really like exaggerated for like entertainment purposes. So goodbye, everybody.